Hi, this is János, this is Real World Audio. Welcome to another Audio Club Monday. And today I'm going to answer questions. And the first question that I'm going to answer is actually reflecting on Bobby's comment on one of my older videos, which was called Marriage of Tubes. And that was a video where I discuss what kind of driver tubes go well with what type of power tubes. And essentially there Bobby commented about another approach which I haven't mentioned in that video yet, and there he says there's another Japanese tube amp designer and his philosophy was to use the same driver tube as the power tubes. So if you want 2A3 or 300B, then your drivers will also be 2A3 or 300B for exact same tonality and distortion spectrum. I wish I could listen to Amp's design in his high purity approach. So he is referring to Susumu Sakuma. So Sakuma-san, he was that Japanese amplifier builder who started using this idea that basically instead of the traditional driver tubes, he was using a power tube in a driver tube duty. And why was it such an unusual idea, and why he was the first one to do that, and why people were not doing that before him, is because normally power tubes are unsuitable for driver purposes. And the reason for that is that they have very low gain. And that means that when you use a power tube as a driver or as an input tube, then it will not have enough gain. So basically the output will be so quiet that you won't hear basically anything. So when you normally would put your volume to the max, then you would barely hear a whisper. And how did he got around that limitation? He got around by using interstage transformers. So basically he was stepping up the signal not in the traditional way that we do in an average power amplifier, where you have your input tube or driver tube which steps up the voltage many times, but he had a power tube instead which stepped up the voltage a little bit, but then he added a transformer which did the big step up in the voltage, so that when you have the output of the amplifier you really have a signal coming out. So that was how he could do that. So that's the secret, to use a power tube as a driver or as an input tube, which was Sakuma-san's way of using it. And usually in DIY audio circles, the legend for it became that as was the same thing that Bobby shared with us. And then he shared it with us because that's what everyone is saying in the audio community, that this approach is done because when you use two driver tubes, they both have the same behavior, same tonality or distortion spectrum. But that's not entirely true. They have the same distortion spectrum when they are operated in the same conditions. So when you have the same plate voltage, you have the same bias, then they will have the same distortion spectrum. And when you look at Sakuma amplifiers, the two tubes, the driver tube and the power tube, are not operated in the same conditions, so they will behave slightly different. And actually there's a good reason for that, because often when you have two following stages and you have the exact same tube in the same operating conditions, usually what you get in result is not something that you want, because you are just reinforcing what one tube does to the sound with one more tube. And normally what happens that when you do this with more generic tubes like EL34 or looking at like the 12EX7, so that's what most people are more familiar with, is with amplifiers that have a bunch of 12EX7s. So when you look at commercial tube amps, push-pull tube amplifiers, that's what you see, is that a bunch of 12EX7s, one after the other, and that will result in a poor tonality, because the distortion spectrum of the 12EX7 is not very nice, and then it all adds up, and then you have that quote-unquote audiophile sound. So after a while you will be able to tell when there's a 12EX7 in your signal. Part of it will sound punchy and dynamic because it has a very high gain, but when you add multiple ones of those into the signal chain, then it will sound a little bit thin and kind of like lacking in tonality. Oh, you see, we have Machiko up there. And but what is the big difference, and why Sakuma is doing the power tube driving a power tube, is that the tubes that he is using, let's have a look at that. So he loved using 300B, but he loved even bigger tubes like the 845, 211. So these are big transmitter triodes. All of them are direct heated triodes. He exclusively used direct heated triodes. And the reason for that is that they have the best linearity of all amplification devices. And even like what some of his famous designs is not just for power amplifier, but for a preamplifier or even for a phono stage. He loved using the 845 transmitter tube, which is a really huge, beefy triode. And the reason for that is that when you have higher and higher plate voltage on a DHT, the better the linearity of the device is. So basically it becomes a more perfect amplification device. And when you are using a more perfect amplification device to drive your power tube, then it will benefit you tremendously, because the earlier you put that device in your chain that has perfect linearity, really optimal amplification characteristics, then that will impact the overall result the more. I know in the world of audio people are obsessed with the power tube, but in reality the tube that matters the most in your audio is the first tube. So if you have, like, let's say a phono stage, you are listening to vinyl, then the first tube in your phono stage will have the biggest impact on the sound. And that's why Susumu Sakuma used even a big DHT tube even in his phono stages. And the benefit of that big transmitter tube or DHTs in general is that they have relatively low plate resistance compared to more modern tubes such as pentodes, which have very high plate resistance. So you cannot just use any power tube in a phono stage, because that high plate resistance of modern pentodes would just totally destroy the ability to step up the output of that tube with an output transformer. However, you would say that, okay, if I put like a high gain pentode as a first tube, then I don't have to step it up that high with the power transformer. So, but still, like if you have like a 50K plate resistance, for the first stage in your phono stage, then just forget about bass response. So it will not work. So you really want to go with those low RP power tubes, DHTs, if you want lower level amplification. So I think that's my thoughts about that approach, about Sakuma's approach, using a DHT to drive a DHT. And actually I would encourage everyone who wants to try it out to play around. So you do not necessarily need to drive a 300B with a 300B. And I would encourage people to just try, like maybe drive a 300B with a 2A3, or maybe an 845 or 211. You can go bonkers on that, like using a 211 to drive a 300B, because a 211 has even higher power output than a 300B. So you can make your input tube or input/driver tube higher power than your output tube driving the speakers. And why would you do that? Why don't you want 211 driving 211? Part of it might be because when you use this approach, DHT driving DHT, and you need like interstage transformer, and an amplifier like 211 driving a 211 will be a monster, an absolute monster. And for those of us or the audiophiles who are young, like in your 20s, 30s, that's not a problem if you build like a 100 kilogram, an amplifier that weighs like 100 kilos or more and occupies like half of your room. That's not a problem. But when, for those of us who are just getting in our 50s, 60s, and you are thinking that you are noticing that maybe your strength is not as much as when you were young, or you are preparing for your elderly years, then you realize that you don't want to build something that you cannot lift, because after a while, if your amplifier is running for 30-40 years, there will come time then when you need to open it up and do just routine maintenance, etc. And odds are that you are the one who is going to do your own maintenance, and you will notice that maybe I'm 60 now, maybe still strong, but when I be 80, there's no way I will be able to do maintenance on that amplifier. And even though I'm still young, and my dream, like even like 10 years ago, was to build like a Sakuma style amplifiers for myself, and thinking of that as my ultimate amplifier. But by now I'm 46 years old, and I have decided that I'm not going to go that way, and I'm going to go to more and more compact amplifiers, because I'm looking at that, like planning for my decades to come, and I just don't want to go there to have something absolutely massive that I cannot even move. So like, and if something happens to me, you know, maybe I break an arm, break a leg, or get into a wheelchair, there is no one in my home who can, like, you know, do anything with those monsters. So that's one thing, that it's not becoming practical. So in my first decades as an audiophile, my dream was to expand my audio system more and more, to take it towards this full DHT route and just go absolute bonkers, put the biggest transformers, everything. And now I'm doing the exact opposite, just trying to figure out how can I make it smaller but still keep that magical sound, but not going totally crazy on building the biggest, heaviest amplifier. Because when you go like a DHT driving DHT approach and you make it stereo, it will be just absolutely massive and monstrous. But here I also have to say that Sakuma-san did mono design, so that cut down the weight to half of what a stereo system would be. But his mono amplifiers were still absolute monsters even for a mono amplifier. I want to do something smaller. In fact, last year I designed perhaps the most compact amplification device conceivable, and I designed that specifically for ultra efficient speakers, and it's mono, it's a flea power output, and it's integrated from phono stage to output in a single box. And here I think this shorted the fuses for many of the audiophiles listening, like, Janos, what's happening here? Why are you putting everything in the same chassis, same little box? And you are sacrificing a lot. Yeah, I'm sacrificing because I could do like expand ad libitum to the end of the universe until the system doesn't fit in one room, and then you can make it better and better and better, but then you end with practicality. It's not something that's sustainable till the end of your life. When you have something like one little box that's sustainable, and it has one benefit that a giant system doesn't have, which is the shortest signal path possible. So there, that shortness of the signal path does come in as an advantage that a system that just expands to your whole room doesn't have. There's also always things, and I'm not saying one is better than the other, just different approaches, and for me, I am now thinking more about just making things more compact, but also at the same time I still have the idea to just maybe play around with bigger and bigger systems, power tube driving power tube. But as the years go by and I figure out that at work I'm just year by year I'm not getting the time I need to have enough brain power for projects to realize, to build, to actually manifest an amplifier as a working amplifier on my desk. Now I notice that I don't have really a lot of practical opportunity to build anything. Like, for example, I'm just sharing that my buddy Irvin, who is the one who is responsible for this channel, because he was telling me, Janos, start an audio channel. He's my closest audio buddy, and he's asked me for over 6 or 7 or 8 years now, or even more, actually more. My gosh, it's almost been a decade since he asked me to build him a pair of amplifiers, and I've been slowly working on them. I still haven't made to finish it in a decade. So I think that just gives everyone the reality of how much free time I do have. And under free time, there's a very big difference in what kind of time one has. And now I'm starting to go into something that might seem strange for some, but it is something that I found really vital. Is that I'm talking now about myself, and maybe what I'm saying now will help you when you do your projects or go somewhere, is that if you just want to build something, you don't need that much to do it. Just just scavenge time from here to there, follow somebody's schematic, put it together, test it, it works, okay, plug it into your system, there you go, poof, done. But I noticed that if I do something with that kind of mentality, which after you have built maybe a lot of amplifiers, designed a lot of them, when you go through that path, so you spent a lifetime building amplifiers, when you look back from there, from the end of your journey to that kind of approach, that you just put together something like that, with that kind of mentality, that kind of mindset, that I'm just following instructions, then you are basically putting in the same amount of effort as shutting a toilet door, which is nothing. It's just bare bottoms, nothing. So for me, when I build anything, then how I do it is I must have an internal reference, internal frame of mind, which also means like internal calmness and ability to focus on it and focus on nothing else. And that needs its own space. So when I come home from work and it's like 10 p.m. and I have like half an hour, that's like that time cannot be used for such a purpose of birthing a new amplifier that will be at the center of my good best buddy's audio system. That would be cheating him and would be like shutting the toilet door on him. And sure, he would have an amp, but it would not be the amp that he wanted, not at that level. And when you, oh, the cats are playing. So when you want to create something that jumps a level or 2 or 3, then you need to be in your creative mindset, creative mind space. Oh, there's a big cat play here. Machi, come here. Machi, come here. Let me, Machi. She's under my chair. Machi, come, Machi, go. Okay, Machi is joining us. So basically I'm sharing about how you can build an amplifier that's more than just the sum of its parts. Because when you are reading about what do you do to make an amplifier work, to be really special, then you read about technologies. Ooh, I could go like DHT tubes. That's much better than just using a pentode or a triode strap pentode. And let's do AC filament or ultrasonic filament on it. And then you can read about these technicalities, or what kind of power supply do I do? Where do I, how do I ground it, etc. There are these things, and all of these are just technical considerations. But how it will work out and whether how it will sound if you do not have a central inspiration, you do not have you do not connect in your soul with the amplifier building process, you do not feel in balance with it, then it's not going to be something special. It will be just something run-of-the-mill, something generic. And at least that's what I noticed. That's how I create. That when I can get to like a state of mind where I look at the amplifier as a living being, and it's kind of like looking at a child and then seeing what that child wants, how that child grows up, and when you do that, it's not just enough thinking about it as a child, but what system it will go into, what will be the room acoustics and everything. You need to integrate everything into your head and adjust the fine balance and basically cook or breathe life into that project based on your intuition. And for me, like getting into that state where the intuition works to make an amplifier requires a lot of rest and the ability that I am not stressed the fuck out at work, which I'm really always am, and like a beep beep beep, that F word is beep beeped out, and like building speakers for me is much easier than that. So like the concentration for that doesn't need to be as deep. And of course, when you build a speaker, the building process and everything is much more simpler. To me, like building an amplifier is something way more complex. And and it requires a much deeper level of getting in tune with that unit. And I think partially that's because my eyesight is not what it used to be. Like 20 years ago, it was very easy for me to give life to an amplifier, but now because I cannot see what's happening, it's much harder. And I appreciate all of those comments that you share, like about magnifier glasses, all kind of things, but for me, who never wore glasses and never needed to use magnifiers, using these, yeah, I can see things, but it's not the same. It's just, and especially like coming home at 10 p.m. and I can, like right now, I can barely read the screen. I had to magnify the letters this big even with glasses. And when your eyes are just that tired after work every day, then there's no way that I can get into the flow to, you know, solder thin wires on the, you know, tube sockets. So that's why I am not turning out that many amplifiers, and basically what I'm doing when I'm doing something on an amp is just modifying something little on one of my amps, and that's it. And by the way, I did a little bit of modification here in this little amplifier that I have here in the cat's room, and I'm going to talk about it sometimes. By the way, it's a new output transformer. I changed the output transformer in it, so that ties with the output transformer video from the previous week. So anyway, that was just my little sharing about building amplifiers, how I do it, or how I used to do it, because now I haven't built a new amp in years, in a very long while. And the ones that I've been building, new amplifiers, I've been working on them for a decade and they are still not finished. Yeah, and so that's it for now. And thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Bobby, for your awesome comment on the DHT, driving DHT, the Sakuma method. And everyone, have a wonderful new week. Bye bye.